Amongst ourselves something, and if that is making you kind of go, oh my goodness, he's gonna make me talk to the person next to you in the pew. You can keep it very short. But the testimony of faith I want to ask you to share is something about housing and shelter. Today it's housing and shelter. Housing and shelter. And the reason I ask you to share that is this past week I was sitting at Woodside Gardens Apartments, and we have this thing coming up on June 13th. And I was sitting with the leaders of the residents that are gathered there. And they started showing me around their apartments. And they're paying $2,200 a month for these places, between what they're paying and what the HUD is paying as part of trying to make up it. So $2,200 a month for an apartment is quite a bit of money, I think. Maybe I'm wrong, but I thought that seemed kind of it. And there are holes in the walls, there's poor maintenance, there's mold coming out of the vents. They showed me a vent which was clean, which had been cleaned 2 weeks ago, and it looked as if it was a living furry vent. I mean, this is where human beings are living, and because they have been working with ACT, Anne-Arundel Connecting Together, which is which this congregation is a part of. Because they've been working with that, they feel confident enough that if 500 people are in that room with them, they can stare down the guy who represents the multi-billion-dollar company that owns this place and demand change. But that's only if we show up and help them out. Because they want to make sure that they're not standing on their own. And no one, when they're taking on that much power, should be on their own. But for us to really care about that story too, means that we have to actually care about, there's probably something in us that is concerned about housing. And we conducted 5,000 listening sessions across the county. And what we learned is that people who live and who work in this county often can't afford to live here. I've heard it from teachers, I've heard it from nurses, and others have heard it from across the board. So this is what I invite you to do, is turn to somebody next to you, whether you know them or not. Maybe you've never had this talk outside of like signing a rental agreement. And say why you're concerned. What one thing about housing would you change? What one thing would be? You got 3 minutes. Go. And why? And why?
Now in the reading of Scripture for the Word and wisdom of God. So the reading today is from the book of Acts, chapter 16, verses 16 through 34. You can follow along in your Pew Bible on page 900. One day, as we were going to the place of prayer, we met a slave girl who had a spirit of divination and brought her owners a great deal of money by fortune-telling. While she followed Paul and us, she would cry out, "These men are slaves of the Most High God, who proclaim to you a way of salvation." She kept doing this for many days. But Paul, very much annoyed, turned and said to the spirit, "I order you in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her." And it came out that very hour. But when her owners saw that their hope of making money was gone, they seized Paul and Silas and dragged them into the marketplace before the authorities. When they had brought them before the magistrates, they said, "These men are disturbing our city. They are Jews and are advocating customs that are not lawful for us as Romans to adopt or observe." The crowd joined in attacking them, and the magistrates had them stripped of their clothing and ordered them to be beaten with rods. After they had given them a severe flogging, they threw them into prison and ordered the jailer to keep them securely. Following these instructions, he put them in the innermost cell and fastened their feet in the stocks. About midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the prisoners were listening to them. Suddenly there was an earthquake so violent that the foundations of the prison were shaken, and immediately all the doors were opened and everyone's chains were unfastened. When the jailer woke up and saw the prison doors wide open, he drew his sword and was about to kill himself, since he supposed that the prisoners had escaped. But Paul shouted in a loud voice, "Do not harm yourself, for we are all here." The jailer called for lights, and rushing in, he fell down trembling before Paul and Silas. Then he brought them outside and said, "Sirs, what must I do to be saved?" They answered, "Believe in the Lord Jesus and you will be saved, you and your household." They spoke the word of the Lord to him and to all who were in his house. At the same hour of the night, he took them and washed their wounds. Then he and his entire family were baptized without delay. He brought them up into the house and set food before them, and he and his entire household rejoiced that he had become a believer in God.
Amen. The second reading today is Psalm 97, and I'm reading a translation by a Church of England priest named Jim Cotter, rather than from the Inclusive Bible. I like how he takes the psalm and gives it some life that sounds familiar to our ears. The foundations of your reign are rarely seen, O God. Salvation and justice are hidden away. Clouds and darkness deepen the mystery. Faith hears but a possible cry. The God of justice comes. The thunder rolls, the lightnings flash, the earth quakes. Evil is burnt up by fire, and the mountains melt like wax. The flames consume corruption, the falling rocks hiss in the sea. We have served vain idols, and we are ashamed, awed by the searing truth. In fear and trembling brought to our knees. Your glory lights up our faces, and our eyes are blinded. We have put lovers and leaders before you. We have bowed down to our petty gods. We have gloried in mere nothings. Like them we crumble to the dust. The city of peace hears its God, and all its inhabitants rejoice. In your judgment, O God, are the poor lifted high. The burdens of oppression slide from their backs. For you love those who resist evil. You guard the life of the faithful. You sustain them when held in the grip of the cruel and greedy and hateful. Your promised day dawns, O God, a day of gladness for the true of heart. Your reign spreads fair before us, like a banquet prepared for a homecoming. Those who love truth flourish in your presence. Their faces glow in the light of your welcome. The courageous and faithful sing for joy and give thanks to your glorious name. Amen. Let us pray. God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be beautiful in your sight, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Being in Philippi, it's a new type of ministry for Paul. We talked about how Paul got there last week. Of course, we did that by talking about the Blues Brothers and talking about how he was on a mission from God. And if you missed it, well, we've got a recording of it, so we won't go over the whole thing. But Paul is in Philippi in Greece, which is in the northern coast of the Aegean Sea. And he's up there because he has been called by God in a vision to be there to help them grow this Jesus-centered community that they've begun to do. And as he wandered through the town, he found this place, this community of mostly women, led by someone named Lydia. Now, up until now, everything that Paul has done has been surreptitious. He walks into a community as this Jewish guy who also is a Roman citizen. And so he's able to kind of just gain access to wherever he wants to be because he's got a great deal of privilege. You see, he can get wherever he wants by just jumping on a boat, going to a place, earning a few dollars here and there, supporting his way, and then just being able to find the people and create a community. And it's always been under the radar, below the surface. He's never walked in and said, "Okay, for a Bible here, because we got a great preacher, everybody line on up, come on, we're all getting saved tonight in the marketplace." That is not how Paul's ministry has worked. It's been quiet. It's been direct. It's been personal. He's gone from each town, traveling through these cities, by invitation, staying with this community of people, developing deep and personal relationships, and helping them to form their own communities. And then, just as easily, he slips out, goes on to the next town, never really remaining in place.
Why?
Well, why is a great question. Why is he doing it? Well, because he's afraid. He's doing it because he's afraid. You just took me off script, and it's a great point. He is doing this because he is afraid, because he knows that this Jesus-centric way of doing things is not in keeping with the Roman Empire, and therefore, the people don't want him there. They don't want him doing this stuff. So he stayed quiet about it.
Well, he didn't have a stuffy.
He did not have a stuffy. Maybe if he did.
He wouldn't feel less afraid.
But he was worried about directly challenging authority. Now Jesus, on the other hand, he went from place to place to place. And he was talking to the Pharisees, he was talking to the Romans, he was gathering crowds, he was saying things out loud. Jesus was doing this very much in the open. Paul knew that if he did that, he would wind up like Jesus, and he didn't want that.
He didn't want to be.
So he stayed quiet. But, you see, we might have great plans of how we think we can do things. It didn't work that way for Paul. Paul went to the marketplaces, and as he's doing this, a slave girl with a spirit of divination totally blows his cover. I mean, just completely blows his cover. In the most annoying way possible. Because there he is, walking down the street, and she's on some of your faces. And can you stop saying it, please? We get the point, Pastor. But imagine if this was following you for a couple of days and you're trying to be, secret agent here, trying to share on 007 kind of way, and they're trying to say, no, billboard for claim. You see, Scripture, I think, is actually quite subtle here. It just says that Paul is very much annoyed. Well, quite. But there's something rather fascinating about this. Because this is a slave girl who is proclaiming to the world Paul's own enslavement. Her spirit does not call him a prophet or a teacher or a pastor or something else. She calls him a slave. Up until now, Paul could get away with his privilege, with his anonymity. He could slip in and out. But now, Paul, who has always benefited from these privilege of appearing not to have any affiliations, from this ability to just kind of blend in because that's how society doesn't see him as different, now called out. And so a person who is so obviously owned by others as a slave girl calls him out, calls out his privilege, calls out who he is, and he loses it. It's a transformational moment for his way of building up the Jesus movement, for he can no longer slip in and out of communities with anonymity. He is a slave to the God, to this Most High God. His world is transformed by this announcement. And as a result, his ministry changes. Now, he didn't want this transformation, of course. He was happy doing ministry the same way that he had always done it. He was happy to just kind of keep slipping in and slipping out and just being quiet about things, but now he's been forced to be hushed. He forced her to be hushed, sorry. He hushed her. He tried to silence her voice. He tried to keep her from proclaiming what was going on. He tried to control her again. He's trying human being, and that is all of the time that he's trying to be quiet. It's not because he was proclaiming good news, it's because he silenced a voice.
It's because
he didn't like what she was saying. He didn't like what was going on, so he silences her, and he gets arrested. She loses her livelihood, such as it was. And he is sent to prison, no longer able to do the ministry God wanted him to do, or the way he thought God wanted him to do it.
That is so rude.
And so, he comes out. I don't know if he ever apologized to the girl. It's not recorded. But he begins to embrace his identity. He begins to pray and sing hymns right there in the prison. He does not go to jail and insist upon his rights as a Roman citizen, not at this point. He does not try to insist to be freed so that he can continue to go back to the work the way he wants to. He has to learn to embrace what has happened, so much so that when an earthquake opens the prison walls, he does not escape. And he prevails upon everyone else to remain, for what chains them down is not so much that prison, but their identities or who they believe that they are. Now there's a meme on the interwebs that suggests that politicians should wear suits like NASCAR racers wear outfits. Have you seen this? It puts all their corporate logos on top so that you know who's paying money to keep them to donate to their campaigns. I doubt that they would ever want to wear those. I doubt any of us would ever want to wear on our sleeves or on our outfits the different things that own us as well. Most of us would bristle, as no doubt Paul did, to be seen as slaves to anything, because slavery is a form of control that oppresses and destroys humanity, or tries to. We don't like to be seen that way. You see, I stand up here as an American white male citizen in 2019, trying to told me in a little bit, in a context where I am supposed to proclaim that I am free. But it's also the first Sunday of Pride Month, when we stand together so that people can claim with authenticity their identities and not be shamed when they don't fit into little ideological boxes. To be labeled or to claim such a label can be liberating. The problem is that we become slaves to certain needs. Joshua Abraham Heschel was a holy troublemaker of his time. He was a mid-20th century rabbi who marched at Selma with Dr. King, preached a message of radical inclusivity and tried to break down many of the barriers that we have. But he wrote this book called The Insecurity of Freedom, Essays on Human Existence, in which he outlined just how unfree we really are. And he began his argument by discussing how we have over-amplified our needs. We feel that we need too much, and more than we can ever secure, and that our happiness and freedom has become chained because of it. We have forgotten who we are because we are constantly saying, I need this, and then 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 I need this. And I'm here saying I need this. We are so in debt to whatever got us there that we have forgotten about God and who we are. Jesus came to liberate a people who were stuck in a slavery of oppression to the Roman Empire. Paul came to share that same message, but was trying to do it with this privilege as who he was, rather than proclaiming what he needed to hide it, so he was away from it. But he got called out by somebody who didn't have that freedom and had to learn to come back to realize who he was. Rabbi Heschel wrote this, and I invite you to listen. We feel jailed in the confinement of personal needs. The more we indulge in satisfactions, the deeper is our feeling of oppressiveness. To be an iconoclast of idolized needs, to defy our own immoral interests, though they seem to be vital and have long been cherished, we must be able to say no to ourselves in the name of a higher yes. Yet our minds are late, slow, erratic. What can give us the power to curb the deference to wrong needs, to detect spiritual fallacies, to ward off false ideals, and to wrestle with inattentiveness to the unseemly and holy? This indeed is the purpose of our religious traditions, to keep alive the higher yes, as well as the power of humankind to say, here I am. To teach our minds to understand the true demand and to teach our minds to be present. Too often we misunderstand the demand. Too often the call goes forth and history records our conscience as absent. We need religion. We need that community. And here in this church we practice a Jesus-focused community that gathers us together, that reminds us by looking and learning and living in that example of Jesus that who we really are is an amazing piece of that tapestry and fabric. And what we really need to be that person is far less than what we thought. How much of our lives, how much of our money, how much of our time has been wasted on chasing that which is not bread? How much of our energy, how much of our wonderful creative imaginations, how much of our treasure has been lost because we are too busy trying to chase some ideal of self that is not us?
Never us.
How much have we forgotten about the person that we are who bears the Imago Dei, the image of God? The church has not always been helpful in doing this. We know for years that the church denied the authentic identities of people, that the church justified enslavement of others, that the church has been an institution that has separated people. The church has denied LGBTQ people full identity, that the church has found ways to take us and label us in negative ways. But we as a congregation, we as a church, we as that Jesus-focused community can reach out, reclaim those and imagine the community that God has called us to be in such a time as this. That we are not going to waste our time anymore on those things that we do not need. That we no longer need to be what we are not. But that we can turn back to the people we are. See, Paul's story goes on from that place, that meal, that festivity, that transformative work. The people in power let him go, but when he goes on to the next city, to Athens, he doesn't hide who he is. He speaks out in a place called the Areopagus. He states clearly what it is that he's trying to do. He becomes the person that he is supposed to be. And his word, his message, the letters that we continue to read to this day, continue to inform and help us grow. They're not just something nice that somebody wrote on a Sunday morning. They became a part of the life of a community because they continued to embrace that authenticity of who we are. So people of God, I ask you, what do you need? What do you really need?
You need food and water.
From the mouth of a child, all God's people said,